The U.S. dollar may still hold the title of the world's reserve currency, but its biggest competitors continue to gain ground, especially as Washington steps up its attempts to use economic power as a weapon against countries it doesn't get along with. But while the U.S. has been turning up the sanctions, countries like China have been on the rise. In fact, according to the latest annual reserve survey from UBS, 85% of central banks say they either hold or want to hold the Chinese yuan. And that's no coincidence, as mainstream analysts admit that Washington's campaign to target and isolate Russia this year has led to concerns that other countries will be next on the list and that they could receive similar treatment if they don't go along with demands from the U.S. As a result of the current economic climate, central banks' average share of U.S. dollar holdings was 63% in June, down significantly from 69% in 2021. This, as other countries such as Argentina and Iran have expressed interest in joining the BRICS group of countries, which, as it stands right now, represents around 40% of the world's population and 25% of the global economy.
Together with BRICS partners, we are developing reliable alternative mechanisms for international settlements. We are exploring the possibility of creating an international reserve currency based on a basket of BRICS currencies.
And with the Western campaign to isolate Russia from SWIFT, Moscow's alternative payment system has only continued to grow and now works with more than 50 foreign organizations from 12 countries. This all comes as China confirms it is in the process of creating a yuan reserve fund with Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Chile, and Singapore, with each country planning to contribute around $2.2 billion, presenting a clear challenge to the dominance of the U.S. dollar. Meanwhile, countries like Egypt are also looking for ways to survive without the big buck, as Cairo sees the ways in which the current sanctions against Russia stand to hurt its own economy.
Russian tourists are also among the biggest spenders in the Egyptian tourism sector. From that perspective, it makes sense for Egypt to try to maintain these relations. The only way to do so under the current sanctions regime is to bypass the US-led financial system, which has become unduly restrictive.
And despite threats from the U.S., other countries are continuing to do big business with Russia, with reports noting that an Indian cement company made the historic purchase of Russian coal in yuan rather than dollars. That could also be the case in the future for Saudi Arabia, amid reports from earlier this year that the nation was considering one day selling oil in China's currency, which would have a major impact on the energy industry. It comes as no surprise then that the U.S. is not happy, and it has been critical of all threats to the dollar's dominance.
We wouldn't like to see mechanisms that are designed to prop up the ruble or to undermine the dollar-based financial system or to circumvent our financial sanctions.
What started as a trickle is beginning to look like a stream, and this all comes in response to a U.S. government that knows exactly how powerful its currency is and has spent years working to weaponize it against other countries. The only problem? Well, those countries are now starting to show there is strength in numbers as they push back with increasing power.
The problem is that there's a real split in where the United States should go, even within Washington, D.C. I've been identifying what I think is a sincere split between the Federal Reserve and the commercial banking interests in the U.S. and White House policy, and U.S. Treasury policy. And I don't think those two groups are on the same page. And I think there's a very strong group of people within the U.S. who realize that having the world's reserve currency is a burden we can no longer afford to have, and are encouraging this kind of de-dollarization. The big question now is, when will Saudi Arabia break their currency peg to the U.S. dollar? Once the Saudis do that, I think we want to look at that as a kind of step function in the rate of de-dollarization. We're going to move into a different regime in terms of globalization of other currencies.